Right, so good to go. So welcome everyone, welcome to Play Sport. It's good to see you all. Yeah, as Kirsty says, we're live on YouTube, so mind your language, as we always do. Subs, now we don't have any subs, however I'm aware we have Councillor Caffrey to come in. We've also got Councillor, are you here, Pete?
I'm here, yeah.
Ah, there you are. Perfect. We've got Councillor Taylor and Councillor Holdsworth as well. Oh, nope, that's not them. So, but we don't have any subs anyway for the meeting. Members' interests. Does any member have any interest at all? No? Josh, you've usually got an interest in something. Do you have anything to declare? No. Right. Number 3, admission of the public. Yep, the public are here and we're live on YouTube. Number 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes from the last meeting?
I move them as a correct record.
I second. All in favour?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's passed. Okay, on to discussion number 5, the petitions. So yeah, we've received 3 petitions actually. The agenda says 2. However, we have had a petition from Craig Whittaker, so that will be discussed third. So that's going to be 5C. Just to manage expectations, as I always do with petitions, this is a scrutiny board. We're not a decision-making body. So therefore, all we can do is we can make recommendations to Cabinet, we can make recommendations to the decision makers. However, we can't actually make a decision here today. So just to manage expectations at this point. Asking members, when we ask questions, it's likely that we members outside of this panel will want to ask questions. So if we could keep all questions as clear, concise and straightforward as possible to officers, I think that should make for a good meeting. So to make that point there. So the running order for tonight, we have petition number 1 from a Miss or Mrs. Samantha Gill, and that's for the Elland petition. And then we've got Councillor Holden for the Salisbury Bridge petition. And then I'm going to hand over to Joe Matthews, who's presenting Craig Whittaker's petition. So, Rob, are you holding your hand up, or are you giving me a sign of peace?
No, I am chair. The petition that I've submitted actually covers both Elland and Salisbury Bridge. It's a joint petition by both myself and Councillor Bellinger.
That's fantastic in that case. Rob, are you the only one speaking on your petition?
No, I believe Councillor Bellinger wants to speak on it as well.
Right. Very good. Right. So, Miss or Mrs. Gill, are you there?
Hi there. Yes, I am.
Hi, perfect. So, can I call you Samantha? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect, Samantha. So I'm going to hand over to you, Samantha. If you just want to present to us for 10 minutes or shorter, if you'd like.
Don't worry.
Yeah, that's okay. Just about your petition, and if you just give us a whirl through.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to attend today and put forward our petition for the opening of Elland Household Waste Recycling Centre. Firstly, I'd just like to say I'm not a politician, a business owner, or anyone versed in these types of meetings, and I am really nervous. However, I am passionate about this cause because it means so much to the people of my community who have felt left behind and neglected for far too long. As residents of Elland and surrounding areas, we are extremely concerned about the current closed status and future of Elland Waste Centre. This public service is vital to residents and businesses in their ability to dispose of excess waste safely and in an environmentally responsible way. Upon starting the petition a few weeks ago, Jessica Gill, who actually started the petition, and myself only anticipated a few hundred signatures. However, as you can see, the response has been amazing, and we now have 1,886 signatures. Residents have commented how important the refuse site is to them on the petition, as well as contacting myself and Jessica directly with their concerns. In the period since the closure of the site, residents have experienced an increase in fly tipping, and the streets are littered with items of waste. These items would previously have been disposed of at the refuse site. Fly tipping has been noted behind pound stretchers, Morrisons, and also on many back streets around the town. As you are aware, this type of signal crime has a damning effect on Elland and its residents. This issue also affects those who own businesses in Elland. Miller's sandwich shop owner Robin Rose contacted me stating that there has been an increase in fly tipping around her shop and onto James Street, where there are other businesses situated. She also states that she used to dispose of her cardboard by recycling it at the refuse site. However, now she doesn't recycle at all. It is important that our businesses feel supported and able to access services locally that are vital to their upkeep. Elland businesses already feel they are struggling with no support from the council. This feels like yet another hurdle for many of them, trying to revive Elland and its town centre at a time when things are difficult enough due to COVID-19. There is also the issue of residents paying van drivers to dispose of their waste at other sites, but fearing that their waste will turn up on the side of the road and they will be implicated in this crime. Sadly, this has been happening more and more as criminals take advantage of those who are the most vulnerable and require the service. Calderdale Council is aware there's been a dramatic increase in fly tipping over the last few months. And it is clear that some people feel there is no option but to dispose of their waste on the streets, knowing the council will eventually clean it up. So, isn't it time that they reopen the Elland site to ease this situation? Yes, we are aware there are other refuse sites located in Halifax and Brighouse. However, these are not accessible to all, and the waiting times and queuing to these sites has increased dramatically, with some claiming to have waited over 2 hours to access this service, my parents included, who are pensioners. This is also causing frustration for the residents of those local areas, as there is an increase in traffic and pollution, and they too have to wait hours to use a service that previously could access in a few minutes. It is my understanding that Suez is a private company that are contracted to deliver this service, and they have an excellent green credentials. I am sure you will agree that it's counterproductive for people to be travelling from the local area to either Halifax or Brighouse, and often waiting for hours in their vehicles, which has a negative impact on the environment. And considering Sovery Bridge refuse site is also closed at the moment, this must put huge pressure on those sites and surrounding areas. Finally, many residents have also contacted me regarding this year's increase in council tax, and they feel while services have been reduced, then so should their council tax bills. Elland is a little town and has been struggling in many ways over the last few years. We have lost our banks, police station, fire station and our swimming facilities. We have to travel outside of our area to access these, and especially during this time of COVID-19 and the fear restrictions surrounding it, this is difficult enough, without adding the pressures of having to venture further afield to find a refuse site too. We are fighting to revive our little town. So to us, the refuse site is more than just a waste disposal point. It is a symbol that our town matters, that it can be revived, and it deserves to be self-sufficient. Elland needs hope and investment, and we need our refuse site open too. Please carefully consider the implications that this service has, not only for the hygiene and aesthetics of Elland, but for the morale of the residents and the businesses also, who are very proud. Elland matters, and we hope that you think so too. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Samantha. You mentioned you were nervous, but we couldn't tell at all. It was a very professional presentation, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Over to Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Chair. Well, how do we follow that? I mean, I think most points, in all fairness, that I would have covered. are actually within Samantha's speech. We presented at Cabinet a petition which covered both Elland and Sowerby Bridge household recycling centres, with a total of 2,366 signatures. Those signatures were gained within a week of that petition going live. The load of emails that I've received, and I know that other ward colleagues have received over the past months regarding the continued closure of Sowerby Bridge and Elland, both of which serve residents in my ward. If you live in Barkland, the likelihood is that you would use the Elland recycling centre. All of which are asking very similar questions to what Samantha touched upon, where what value for money are we getting from our council tax? Now, as elected members, we know where the vast majority of our funds go. It's on supporting children and adult social care. However, the situation that we have at the moment isn't equitable. You know, we have residents who live in Rishworth and Ripponden and Barkisland who are having to travel a good half hour to get to their nearest recycling centre by the time you take into account the vast number of roadworks that are currently in place. When they do get to a recycling centre, they can expect to have a wait of up to 2 hours. And this is per load of generally what would normally be a half hour, 3/4 of an hour round trip at most. The amount of time, money, damage to the environment that these continued closures are causing is unbelievable. The administration and the chief executive make a great deal about Vision 2024. Part of that is becoming where they claim a climate emergency, and we're trying to do the best that we can. We are not, as a council, doing the best that we can. We are not providing our residents with the basics such as accessible recycling centres. As such, we've had additional load placed on our other services, such as curbside services, household waste collection services. And that's had a twofold effect. Not only has it meant that quite a lot of rubbish hasn't been collected, and I've experienced that myself, but we've also had an increase in things like vermin. For the first time in 20 years, I've actually seen rats running around near my property. And this is as a result of household waste not being collected on time because the waste collection services have got far too much work on. The reason why they've got far too much work on is because the community cannot get to their local household recycling centre to dispose of it. So it's an ever-increasing problem, and it's not going to go away. And until the administration actually get a grip of this situation, open up the centres, the community will work with them. They want to be able to dispose of their own rubbish. But at the moment, they haven't got that facility to do it. And who wants to go and spend half the day traipsing to a household recycling centre to get rid of the waste they are paying for a service that should be on their doorstep or near as damn it. I would seriously encourage this board to put forward a recommendation to Cabinet that they look to reopen those recycling centres as soon as possible. Throughout the period that they've been closed, and from the 11th of May, when the other 3 reopened, or when 2 of them reopened, both myself and Councillor Bellinger have been asking the question of senior management at Calderdale, why are these recycling centres not being opened? And in all honesty, we have been fed one tale after another. First, we were told that there would be a problem with traffic management. Second, we were told that there was a lack of staff. When those answers started wearing a little bit thin, we were then told, well, the financial implications would have to be looked at. Now, I'm not being funny. They're trying to make assessments on financial implications regarding opening these recycling centres without actually knowing what the final cost of the COVID bill is going to be. So quite a lot of this, if what we're being told is to be believed, is based on financial assumptions that can't actually be made yet, because we don't know what the final settlement figure will be from the government regarding the COVID bill. So what I'm saying is, let's crack on. Let's get these centres reopened as soon as possible. Let's get it so that the community can start getting rid of their waste again. And let's move things along, because we've all got better things to be doing than talking about recycling centres that have been closed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Holden. Councillor Bellinger, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. To be quite honest, between Rob and Samantha, they've covered quite a number of points really that I was going to get across this evening. I mean, to be fair, we're speaking so far on behalf of 4,500 people. That's the figures between those two signatures, those two petitions, sorry, alone. There's a third petition yet to come in with I don't know how many signatures on there. So you can understand how many people are actually frustrated at the fact that these two centres are still remaining closed. My points, or should I say my questions really this evening, because all the points have been made, is what is the process needed to open the two remaining sites, the length of time that this process takes, and if Sowerby Bridge and Elland are already in that process, how far into that process are they? How long does it take? And what is the cost of opening those two sites? Now, bearing in mind, we actually have a contract with Suez, and it's Suez that run those recycling centres. So if we are actually contracted into them, then surely we cannot deviate away from that contractual agreement. So why should there be any extra cost to open these two recycling centres? So they're really the points that I'd like to get across. What I'd also like to make, as well, is the extra cost on fly tipping. From April to June, fly tipping had increased by 259 cases compared to the previous year. Now, that works out at £23,000 it's cost us for fly tipping for those 3 months, on top of the £70,000 that the figure was for last year. So to take that off, if there's any cost to opening these centres, how is that offset between the cost of opening the centres and the cost extra to us as an authority to clean up the fly tipping that these centres, by having these centres closed, has cost us? So there's a considerable amount of money there it's cost us as an authority. So they're really my points I want to get across, my questions that I would like answering this evening, ideally. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Bellinger. Right, I'm going to hand over to Joe Matthews now. Joe, are you there?
I am indeed.
Right, Joe's representing Craig Whittaker's petition. So over to you, Joe.
Well, thank you, Chair. The MP's office, of which I represent, have received over 600 emails from residents airing their frustrations at the council's failure to reopen the Elland and Sowerby Bridge recycling centres. The decision taken by Cabinet to keep the two sites closed, even after HWRCs were permitted to reopen by the government on Monday, the 11th of May, has led to a significant increase in fly tipping here in Calderdale. The figures for January to July 2020 put fly tipping 34% higher than it was during the same period last year. And Calderdale Council's Assistant Director for Public Services has stated clearly that the rise in fly tipping can be directly correlated to the closing of the HWRCs. However, despite the danger fly tipping presents to the environment, public health, and the £58 million it costs for councils to clear up each year, the council still insists on keeping Elland and Sowerby Bridge HWRCs closed. Due to the coronavirus crisis, the government provided Calderdale Council with £20 million to aid in the running of essential services, including the HWRCs. Money which was gladly accepted by the council, but due to the council's failure to listen to residents, has not been utilised for its intended purpose or utilised in accordance with the residents' needs. Despite providing a reduced service, the council continues to charge people their full council tax rates, rates that are calculated to cover frontline services provided by the council, services that this council is failing to provide to the people of the borough. The council's contract with sewers stipulates payment in full despite contractual agreements not being fulfilled. Obviously now this has been superseded by the PPN 04/20, but until a recovery contract has been agreed and signed off, this hardly represents value for money for residents. The decision has not just been a burden on the areas of Ellen and Sorby Bridge, however. Areas such as Big House are facing major congestion issues as a result of people having nowhere else to travel and dispose of their waste. On the 22nd of July, Councillor Adam Wilkinson released a statement regarding the closed HWRCs in Elland and Sorby Bridge, stating that the two things preventing these sites reopening were money, need I mention the £20 million again, and issues with social distancing / traffic concerns. Yet, on the 1st of June, McDonald's at Salter Heaven Hill was given the green light to reopen. This was despite daily queues running right the way up Salter Heaven Hill, causing chaos on the roads, making access to the local hospital extremely difficult and bringing the whole area to a near standstill. Whilst I acknowledge that McDonald's is indeed a private company, this created problems on the road that should have been dealt with by the Highways Department. It would appear that these roads and the people that utilise them are clearly not a priority. Congestion continues to rise across Big House, exacerbated by the closure of Park Road and other areas of the Calder Valley, and fly tipping has increased and remains at a high level when compared with the start of the lockdown in March. Residents' concern is that the council have not even set a date for reopening the two tips remain closed, and therefore seem to have no plans or ambitions to reopen them at all. The reopening of HWRCs in Elland and Sorby Bridge would assist further with congestion issues in both Halifax and Big House, which have both seen a substantial increase in traffic despite the decrease of vehicles on the road due to the coronavirus crisis. Further to the above issues, the office has received many emails relating to missed or delayed bin collections and excess waste not being collected at all. These people are unable to dispose of their waste themselves as their local HWRCs are not yet open. This leads to more complaints being submitted to the council and more work for the local bin men. The people of Sorby Bridge and Elland find themselves in an even more difficult position with no alternatives for recycling or waste disposal anywhere within their wards. Whilst we are aware that Big House, Halifax, Todmorden all have supermarkets with recycling facilities, Sorby Bridge and Elland do not. This puts them at a major disadvantage and leaves those without their own model of transport stuck with no possibility of disposing of any waste or recycling from their household whatsoever. Contrary to the argument from Calderdale, many councils across the country have managed to reopen all of their HWRCs and each of their sections from household waste to electrics and recycling. They've done this successfully with sensible measures put in place to ensure the safety of all staff and residents alike. Councils like Leeds City Council and Kirklees Council, who also operate their centres through sewers, have found solutions to the problems, initiating rules such as permits and pre-booking, as opposed to putting up roadblocks and making excuses. It is our hope that the council will take the time to look at the impact their decision is having on the local community and finally make the right call.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Right, I'm going to hand over to Councillor Press first and then officers. Before I do that, I would just like to highlight Councillor Bellinger, the response to his question, item number 12, on the answers that we've been provided with. If we could just seek some clarity on the contractual variation, and also the variation that superseded that original variation, that would be very interesting because that is quite material to this discussion. So over to Councillor Press and officers, if I may.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I just want to say, first of all, I want to say thank you to all our officers and everybody connected with the council who's been working so hard in these unprecedented difficult times. And they are difficult times, there's absolutely no question, for everybody. And I don't think any of us, I was going to say around this table, but around whatever, metaphorically, none of us underestimate the difficulties that we've all been facing, and the council certainly does not underestimate the frustrations and the concerns which are manifested in these petitions, and I take take that fully into account, and we'll take that back, and we'll be looking at all the issues raised. But I find it really disappointing that one or two, I would say that one or two councillors perhaps are perhaps suggesting there's something willful or deliberate or, you know, not well intended about what the council has been trying to do in the past few months regarding the HWRCs. The point I want to make, the officers will come in with the details and the specifics and all the facts and the figures that you've asked for. But the prime concern, when we took the decision we made originally to close all the HWRCs and then to only reopen 3, the reason for that decision was very straightforward and very simple. It was to keep the staff safe. It was felt then, and it's still felt at the moment, that what we wanted to do was to make sure that not only were the facilities open in line with national and local guidance issues, that they were places where the staff and the operators would be able to operate safely and that the public would be able to use them safely. So that has been our priority right from the start, and it's still our priority now. That's really one of the main points I wanted to make. We've also been doing our best under extraordinary circumstances. Our priority at the moment remains curbside collections, and I accept there's been a lot of pressure. I accept that some collections have been missed, but the officers will have the precise details and the rates of collection, and I think you will find actually that sewers have actually done remarkably well, considering they still have a number of staff who are shielding, and they are dealing with obviously additional items which they have to pick up. We are taking on board, we've been taking on board what's being said. We're doing our best to reintroduce a limited bulky waste collection service. That's another way for people to dispose of waste. And there's lots of information on the council website about waste management and alternative disposals. Safety is paramount. We're still an area of concern, or at least as far as I'm aware. I think we found out before midnight, but we've also had to deal with in the last few weeks the fact we were put under another semi-lockdown situation. So we've had all that stress to deal with. And I think that's just the final thing I want to say is that I appreciate people's frustrations, do appreciate their concerns. We're constantly looking at the situation, and we are, I know it's not what people want to hear, but we are actually meeting our statutory responsibilities, and we are operating within the national guidance on HWRC provision. Councillor Scullion may want to come in on the finances of it all because she's got more detail than me, and I'll leave it to the officers to tell you more about the specifics. But I think that's probably all I wanted to say.
Shall I hand over to Councillor Scullion first, and then we could go over to officers? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That was a bit of a surprise. I was expecting you to go straight to officers. Apologies.
Would you prefer that, Councillor Scullion?
Yes, why not? I'm happy to talk about the finances and the overall strategic position of the council, and also pick up some of the highways issues that Councillor Craig Whittaker MP mentioned. Happy to pick up some of the highways issues and the finance issues, but maybe some of the details specifically to do with the waste sites from the officers might be better for us, Chair.
Fantastic, no problem at all. Zora, shall I go over to you now?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I do have Jamie with me, and Jamie obviously will be able to respond to more of the detailed operational questions that members may have. But I think just in terms of context, and I think we all know where we've come from, and we're still living within these challenging and probably unprecedented times with COVID-19. In Calderdale, we, alongside with other authorities, closed our household waste recycling centres when the government guidance stated that no non-essential journeys should take place. And then they were kept closed for a period of 7 weeks, and then we were able to start looking at a phased reopening of our waste recycling centres. And we've been able to reopen the 3 centres so far in Halifax, Brighouse, and over at Todmorden. And of course, the discussion tonight is around those 2 centres that remain closed, namely Elland and Sorby Bridge. I think it's been alluded to already, but the household waste recycling centres are managed through our partners Suez as part of that contract. As we've looked at the challenges facing us, we have very much prioritised the household and curbside collection. That's our priority, and sustaining that service throughout this time has been difficult, it's been challenging, and I fully commend Suez and their staff on the performance and the way that they've managed to continue that service. I think Councillor Holden alluded to the increase in recycling, for example, that's been left and is required to be collected, and we are seeing an increase in volumes. What we're also still trying to do as we work through this, and particularly given what Councillor Press has alluded to, the additional restrictions that remain in place in Calderdale, we do remain an area of concern, is that we're trying to, with Suez, to manage the safety of the staff, to make sure that they can operate safely, to make sure that we're not increasing the risk to their public health. We're making sure that the sites that are open, that we can actually manage them properly, and that's both in terms of the site itself and the highway that's adjacent or leading into those sites. We're also making sure that in terms of capacity, that we can actually, with Suez, we can manage absences, whether those absences are through sickness or, as we're seeing, you'll be aware of, staff having to isolate for periods of time before they're allowed to come back into work. So there's something of almost a revolving door going on there. But the staff that would normally work at Sorby Bridge and Elland are also being utilised to actually help support and manage the other 3 sites. And that's under constant discussion with Suez and with colleagues in Suez to actually monitor how that performance is going and how well that's operating. We are seeing significant queue times at the household waste recycling centres that are open. We're aware of that, and where necessary, we're putting traffic management in place, and we're managing it to the best of the ability, given the current capacity that we have at any one time. But we are keeping that under review. I'm aware that Cabinet are going to review this again in September, and of course that's a decision for Cabinet to make in terms of what the service will look like going forward, depending on what the capacity is, and of course where we are in terms of COVID-19 at that point, and what the restrictions might be that we're actually working within. In terms of the overall capacity, the overall level of service that we provide across Calderdale, when we actually look at the number of sites that we have, both in terms of the geographical area that those sites cover and in terms of the population that they serve, we exceed the statutory requirements. And in fact, if you do a comparison with other authorities, I think you'll see that Calderdale by far exceed the level of service that is required from a statutory basis. We go over and above, and we do provide an excellent level of service. The review of the household waste recycling centres is due to be considered by Cabinet in September, and I'm aware, of course, that the petitions will be discussed at the meeting of the full council when that takes place in September as well. In terms, Councillor Scullion, I think, said that she was going to mention the finances, and of course, in terms of the actual highway, because I was quite interested in the McDonald's example, because of course that isn't a council decision. That's something which is outside of our control. I don't know if you want us to bring Jamie in to answer any sort of detailed questions that you might have at this point, Chair.
Yeah, Zora, and there's been a bit of a some comments on the chat. Basically, people are wanting to know if they are ever going to reopen. So maybe if you could just build that into your responses, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, certainly at the moment, in line with a number of other services that we have, sort of leisure centres, libraries, we're looking at a phased reopening of services. And what we have established is a future council officer group, which basically helps to prepare the business cases for bringing services back online for consideration by our cabinet. As it stands at the moment, we've moved quickly to open the 3 centres that we've got open, and we will be reviewing the other 2 centres, well, next month, isn't it, September?
So if I may, Zora, just to clarify this point, in 2 years' time, after COVID is over, we've all had a vaccine, we're all healthy, will the tips be open? So all of the tips that are currently there, will they be open in 2 years' time?
I actually can't answer that question. I can't answer that with a yes or a no. That's not my decision. That would be a political decision taken depending on what the council's finances are and the shape of the council going forward, I guess.
I appreciate that response, Zora. Thank you. So we're handing over to who was it? Sorry, Zora.
It's Jamie who's with us. Who I've only got a limited number on my screen.
Yeah. Over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, it's me.
I can't see him.
Okay, right. Well, I've tried to pick up on some of the more detailed questions. First of all, just a point of clarity. The household waste sites are strictly for residential waste, no business waste. No business waste should be going to the household waste sites. Businesses need to deal with their own waste if they're using a private contractor. In terms of some of the questions Councillor Bellinger had that were quite specific, we've already had meetings on site with Suez and our health and safety and the highways people. We probably could get the sites open within 2 weeks of being given the green light. There are some significant costs associated with that on top of the contract costs, because both sites will require traffic management, which is one of the reasons they weren't opened in the first place, is the traffic management is difficult. So roughly for Salisbury Bridge, it'll be £500 a day, and it will require reversing the access into the site using the exit as the access and the entrance as the exit, and also only allowing access from one side, so the opposite end to Salisbury Bridge. With Elland, we're looking at up to £1,000 a day for traffic management, and that's still only allowing 6 vehicles on site and about 10 vehicles off site, so you're getting very few vehicles actually through the site. One of the major reasons that we are getting such big queues at our household waste sites is due to the fact that we have to keep every other bay empty, which is advice from public health and health and safety. And this is one of the main reasons that we are not getting the throughput that we would like. And with the smaller sites that are Salisbury Bridge and Elland, this will also make things difficult. On top of that, Salisbury Bridge, because it does not have a split level site and we need to close the site whenever we do a skip exchange, the opening hours are likely to be reduced from 10 till 4, where we try and get all the skip exchanges done in the morning before the site opens. I don't think I can remember any more specific questions, but I'm here if you need me.
Perfect, thank you, Jamie. That's really helpful. I'll hand over to Councillor Scullion now, if I may. Councillor Scullion, I would like to get to the bottom of this point, if possible. Obviously, when we are well, when there's a vaccine, 2 years' time, I'm predicting 2 years' time, I've got no scientific evidence for that, but when we are all well, can we expect all of the tips to be open when there's a vaccine or when there's no restrictions? Over to you, Councillor Scullion. That is just that is a nitty gritty of this discussion here.
Okay, and I will come to that. I've enjoyed tremendously, or maybe not enjoy is the right word, extraordinary rumours, really. Let me be very clear in terms of squashing those rumours. There is absolutely there isn't even a discussion taking place about selling those sites. I don't know where those rumours are fantastical, actually. So, you know, that's not been part of the discussion. As Councillor Press has indicated, actually, it seems almost as though we are discussing nothing but pandemic, tips and finance, really, at Cabinet. Those things are being kept under review. Those three things are kept under review almost on a daily basis. How can we keep people safe in the public as a whole, and also our employees? We've got a public health duty to the people of the borough, all of the people. And we've got a health and safety duty to our employees and the people we contract to work for us. The question of the tips and indeed the reopening of all the services safely is something that's kept under review, and we're discussing every day. And the final thing is the question of the finance. And I guess that brings me to answering the question that Councillor Robinson re-put to me and was previously mentioned. Can I guarantee that in 2 years' time, when, you know, let's really, really hope that we find a vaccine and that we don't have to live in this way any longer, will all the tips be open? To be honest, Councillor Robinson and members, I can't guarantee that any of our services will be open at that point, really, because we do not know what the funding for councils is going to be, what the core services are going to be, and what the discretionary services are going to be. And you already heard Zora Zankudi talk about the level of provision and where in some cases we over-provide above the statutory level. We're going to discuss at the next Cabinet meeting take an interim look, as it were, at the medium-term financial strategy, which tells us about the forthcoming year and the 2 years subsequent to that. You will remember, members, that we have previously at Cabinet and Council talked about the pressures that the Council was under in relation to adults and children's social care, and those were this year, and we were struggling with those, and we were trying to make savings and managing those pressures out. And I have to tell you that the news, if you had seen the last Cabinet meeting online or participated in it, you will know that the revenue report of the first quarter is very, very gloomy indeed. And that informs our predictions for the medium-term financial strategy and what indeed this year, next year looks like. We've got current pressures because of those savings that we couldn't make on things like special educational needs transport, new homes bonus, the income deficit and so on. We are very grateful that the government is offering to cover 75% of some of those costs, but of course, and deficits, but of course that still leaves us with a big gap in the budget. And we are working on a daily basis because the government are giving us new information every day and we are providing new returns every day. But I have to be honest that we are looking somewhere between 8 million and about 20 million in terms of deficit for this year. So as Zora Zankudi has already indicated, we are basically saying, well, actually, as we look at the business plan, financially and in terms of safety and in terms of core provision versus discretionary provision, we're looking very carefully every single thing that we do before we make that decision. And that's one of the reasons, as well as the other things that have been said by Mr. Rossi Stevenson in terms of some of the difficulties that we've had. And we've been on a journey. We really have been on a journey in terms of the different things we've had to take into account. And we're in a particular phase of the journey at the moment with extra restrictions that we would really rather not have. But I can't guarantee that in 2 years' time any of the council services beyond the statutory services will be in place. And I'm sorry if that sounds very, very gloomy, but I'm being realistic. I really hope that actually things will look better, and they might look better tomorrow or next week. But we have to plan for the worst and hope for the best in terms of all those questions to do with the pandemic. Let me come on to the highways issues. And Mr. Whittaker did raise the issue of McDonald's, and he will remember in Brighouse there were terrible traffic problems when McDonald's reopened, and we actually did work with McDonald's and Brighouse to use their car park, and suggested to them ways in which they as a private company could mitigate some of those traffic issues, and likewise in Halifax. We are, and I'm really sorry about this, I apologise on behalf of the council, but also on behalf of the gods of the weather. Of course, we are in a very difficult situation in highways. It's not something the council wishes to have, but of course we did have a landslip because of the flooding at Park Road in Elland, and that makes for further difficulties. There's nothing we can do about that. We hope to be through, we have started work, we hope to be through by next spring. But the highways issues are important to us in terms of safety. We do not want queuing traffic on the highways where somebody not concentrating smashes into the back of a queue of traffic. We have a responsibility in terms of safety on the public highway. So we are balancing some of those issues. And I'll just end, if I may, Chair, by reminding people that 70% of the council's revenue budget goes on adults and children's social care, keeping children with disabilities, children who can't live with their parents, children who've been sexually abused, older people who need our care. 70% of the council's budget is spent on that. That leaves the remaining 30% to be spent on all the things that are very close to people, like the tips, like cutting the grass in the parks, all of the things that touch people in terms of their everyday life. And we are constantly reviewing how we can manage and balance those different needs. And I really hear what the petitioners are saying, and we are genuinely looking for ways through this. We really are. And we will be working on all of the suggestions that people make tonight as well. So I'm very grateful for ideas that people have in terms of how we keep the public safe, how we keep the employees safe, how we manage the highway safety, and how we balance the books. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion, and thank you for the direct response as well. That's appreciated. Over to Josh, Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Yeah, so excuse me if I have any connection issues today. I think the storm's not been brilliant for my reception. I've got a few questions. I'm going to try to ask them all at once, just so that we can get a kind of picture of what things are like for the officers. And a lot of these questions are being asked out of ignorance. I'm not trying to make a point. The first one is, I want to just get an idea, because obviously we heard about it leading to more road travel. I'd like to know what the kind of maximum distances people are travelling by road is. And then, because I think that's quite an important thing for us to be able to understand that. Secondly, when we're thinking about capacity at the tips, I'd like to know kind of, essentially, I was trying to work out the best way to measure it, but I guess like how many tips per person do we have would be quite a useful kind of ratio to understand. I mean, I've heard that we meet the statutory goals, but I'd be interested to know how that compares to neighbouring authorities, say Kirklees or Bradford, for example, who've opened their tips, just to kind of get an idea of this level of service that they've opened. So yeah, the kind of people per tip, I guess, not tips per person.
I think he's frozen. It's either that or he's staying very still. What I'll do, I'll pass over to officers, or indeed cabinet members at this point, if you want to answer those two questions.
I can. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's okay. Go on.
I can answer the population per tip quite easily now. If you want me to.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Jamie, do you want to answer the population thing, and then we'll go back over to Josh to finish his questions?
Okay, yeah. So at the minute, Calderdale has a population of 210,000 people and 3 household waste sites open, which is 70,000 people per household waste site. For Kirklees, it's currently 80,000 people per household waste site. Leeds is 95,000 people per household waste site, and Wakefield is 107,000 people per household waste site, with Bradford being 65,000 people household waste site. When we have 5 open, it's 42,000 people per site.
Perfect, thank you, Jamie. Right, back over to you, Josh.
Sorry about that technology. So the question I had was the kind of maximum distance, to get an idea of how it's impacting the roads. And then the final one is how the profile and what we're using tips for has changed during COVID, both in terms of staff having to shield, but also, I mean, I understand that recycling rates are up, so I understand that that we're getting more glass recycling. I certainly know, not because I've got an online ordering habit, honest, that we're recycling a lot more cardboard at my house. So like, I'd just be interested to know how that's impacted things. And maybe at this point I should declare an interest that I'm getting it in the neck from my mum, who's been shielding and done a bit of a clear out, and therefore has like boxes and boxes of stuff for me to take down to Eastwood when we get the chance. So yeah, so I'd just like to know how the kind of profile of our tip use has changed, and whether we got a particular surge in demand, particularly in the first few days back.
Over to officers.
Okay, in terms of, I don't know the average distance. I'd have to look into that and come back to you, or the maximum distance. As for the profile of waste, currently we're only accepting general waste, garden waste, wood, metal, and WEEE at the household waste sites. When we first opened them, there was a high demand for garden waste and general waste, and that's what we started with. And we've gradually introduced things. The thing that's holding us up at the minute is if we include all the other items, it increases the movements on site between people passing each other, etc. But also, because we can't park in every bay, it will significantly slow down the sites even more. As for curbside collections, in the height of lockdown, it was basically like Christmas every week with the amount of recycling that we had. And as you can imagine, instead of people going to work and maybe disposing or recycling of their waste at their workplace, it was all falling on the curbside collection, which was managed rather well, I thought.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Over to Councillor A. Smith.
Thanks, George. I wondered, will we be able to get an environmental impact report on the impact of additional journeys and length of journeys to the tip? Because I think that would be helpful when we're making a decision. Also, this question's a little bit around what Josh was saying on cost per tonne to recycle or dispose of waste per site. Does it vary much between sites? Is Sowerby Bridge especially expensive? Also, just I wondered if it's anticipated that waste and recycling will go down sort of post-COVID restrictions. Are we expecting to see it sort of tail off maybe as we move into recession? People are ordering less. Is that another consideration that you've looked at? And what are the planning? What are we planning as a council to try and get people to consider how to reduce the amount of waste that they actually generate? Because I really think this just can't go on forever. I mean, we've got an incinerator coming to Sowerby Bridge. I mean, these are a direct result of too much waste being disposed of, well, being created in the first place. And the other idea was a suggestion. What about weekend opening of Sowerby Bridge and Elland? Would that still generate the same traffic management? And I just wondered if that had been considered already, whether that would be worth modelling, because a lot of people would like to, would probably be able to access the centres at the weekend. Thank you. I think that is it. But really, I'd like to recommend that we have an environmental impact report, especially.
Interesting. Over to officers.
As for an environmental impact assessment, that's something we'd have to have a look at. I do know that vehicle journeys in total are lower due to COVID, so I don't know how we would really be able to single out the household waste sites not being open and how that's increasing journey times. It would be a difficult thing to do. As for cost per tonne, within the contract, the cost of all the recycling or the income from the recycling is SUEZ, and the council pays for the disposal of the general waste, which is the same price per site. In terms of the savings from closing the sites, there's slightly more money from closing Sowerby Bridge than there is Elland. As for reducing waste and increasing cycling, this is something that we'll be looking at as part of our net zero carbon targets, and although there's nothing planned at the minute, I know it's something that's definitely the environment management team is looking at and something that we're trying to address. Some of the ways of doing that might not be popular, such as decreasing waste collections, forcing people to recycle, but there's lots of different things that can be done. As for weekend opening, again, once we have a decision from members, it's something we can consider if it's decided that's a good option. Personally, I think that might cause a lot of traffic problems on a weekend, which might be difficult to manage, and there'll be the same traffic costs, which are £500 a day or potentially £1,000 a day at Elland.
Interesting, thank you very much. Are there any other place members who have questions?
Yes, George?
Yep, sorry, my screen's freezing, but over to you, Councillor Kavanagh.
I just wanted, to start off, just wanted to say to Samantha that I understand the frustration around when you feel like the place that you live has been forgotten, but I just wanted to say that you've got really hardworking councillors that really care about Elland and are constantly fighting to get improvements for the centre of Elland and the whole area. So just to say that. Then the second thing is just a practical question to officers. Lots of people under lockdown have obviously been clearing out their entire houses, attics, sheds, everything. Have we got a plan in place to deal with a potential backlog of items that are building up in people's houses? That's the first thing. And then the second thing, I just wanted to ask a cabinet member, so either Councillor Scullion or Councillor Press. I'm sure that the cabinet will be open to considering options in terms of potential ways. I think it's really clear that we're trying to balance out shielding of staff, health and safety, in addition to being able to manage as many centres as possible. But I'm sure that the cabinet will be open to other options, whether that's reopening other sites for longer or trialling the opening of one of the other sites. Is that something? Is it something that the cabinet can go back and consider what other potential options there might be?
Interesting point. Over to Councillor Scullion.
Councillor Press may have something to. Yes, we're open to ideas, and I like your idea about the backlog is true. We have all been sorting out stuff to take to charity shops and to the tip, and clearing out our attics, and so that has partly led to a build-up of stuff that people just want to get out of their houses in different ways. I have a fantasy, and it comes back to what Councillor Audrey Smith said about being better at reusing and recycling, and reducing waste at source. And that's, we have some really fantastic repair shop like the television programme, which actually encourages people to mend things, particularly electrical things, I think, that we throw away much too readily. So the answer is we are open to ideas. I do have a suspicion that this scrutiny committee may have a particular decision in mind in terms of where it wants to go, but I want to emphasise that we are genuinely open to ideas and suggestions.
Yeah, I haven't particularly got anything to add to that other than to reiterate what I said a bit ago, which is that please don't think that the council isn't acting in good faith. We are doing our very best in very difficult circumstances, and we are listening to what people are saying, but that is against the background that Councillor Scullion has already outlined of the difficulties that we're facing financially and in other ways too.
Perfect, thank you very much. Over to Councillor Holden.
People are saying, but that is against the background that Councillor Scullion has already.
Thank you, Chair. Anyone that knows me knows that I generally keep composure. I'm finding it very, very difficult this evening, I have to say. To say I'm absolutely livid is quite an understatement. Anyone with half an iota of sense can see what the direction of travel is of this council with regards to these two household recycling centres. I have in front of me an email from Robin Tuddenham, the Chief Executive, who is a fly tipping denier as far as I'm concerned. He has gone on record to say there is no evidence that there is any increase in fly tipping due to current service provision, which is wholly proportionate to our local population and in excess of that provided by neighbouring authorities. Some time ago, we asked Assistant Director Pitts for the figures for fly tipping from last year compared to this year. There is a 50% increase, and the increase can be demonstrated from March onwards. I'm sorry, but I will not accept that the closure of these sites is not linked to the increase in fly tipping in our wards. Also, there has been much talk tonight from officers and from cabinet members that all of this is down to how the tips can work and how they can work safely. Every time we've asked a question, up until about 6 weeks ago, we were given those answers. You know, and to an extent, you can accept those answers because, yes, we want to make sure that the staff are safe. I've actually taken the time out to speak to staff, sewers staff, who have told me themselves they could operate safely within the measures required of them by government. These are staff that actually work at these centres. You know, I'm talking about people on the ground who can put the measures in place. They've told me face to face they can make them work. Now, if we go back to Mr. Tuddenham's email, he then said, Cabinet are considering what level of discretionary service can be provided in a context where the severe financial pressures the council is facing in meeting our legal statutory duties is becoming increasingly difficult, which is civil service speak for we're going to look at it, we're going to make the savings, and these tips are going to close. Well, I'm sorry, it's not good enough. I just want to pick up on another couple of points, if I may. On average, residents in my ward have got between a 16 and 20 mile round trip on average, and that's on average. That isn't the most, it's not the least. If you stood in the centre of Ryburn, that is the average trip to any one of the 3 sites. Now, that to me isn't acceptable, and that is part of why we've got the fly tipping that we've got. Councillor Price earlier spoke about, well, we're bringing back bulky waste collections. That's great, but some of the people that we're dealing with don't have the money to pay for a bulky waste collection. You know, they're already paying the council tax. Why should they have to pay additional money to get more waste collected? I'm sorry, it's not on. And it's about time this council started prioritising for the residents. Because I'll tell you one thing, the residents in Ryburn have had enough.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holden. Officers and or cabinet members from that impassioned speech.
Can I come in?
Yep, Zoe, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Just on the subject of fly tipping, whilst the 5 sites were shut, we did see an increase in fly tipping. And the note that I've got says it's approximately about 30%. So there has been an increase in fly tipping. I think it's also just worth noting that nationally, and I'm talking about pre-COVID, so in normal times, if we can remember what they were, nationally, there's an increase in fly tipping as well. And it's not something which is just about Calderdale, it's a national problem. In terms of recent times, as I've said, when the 5 sites were shut, we did see a 30% increase in fly tipping. And I absolutely agree that that's not acceptable, and nobody wants to see that in their neighbourhood or where they live. Interestingly, but again, just a matter for members, the fly tipping, the main fly tipping that we see is actually in Halifax, where there is a household waste recycling centre that has remained open.
Okay. Sorry, how do you finish then, Zora?
Sorry, yeah, I don't know if my internet connection's a bit shaky, but yeah, in terms of fly tipping, but then just to, I think, echo the points made by sort of Councillor Scullion and Councillor Press, certainly from an officer perspective, but more than happy to actually work with people, look at different ideas, look at different suggestions as to how this can be managed differently or more innovatively across the borough. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zora. Okay, right. Miss Stead, are you?
Hi.
Yeah. Hello there. Welcome.
So, my name's Mel. I live in Mishworth, up on Oldham Road, right up the top of Oldham Road. And just for a point of interest, I own a business in the area that employs a number of people. And as a point of interest, I'm currently advising, or over the last 6 months, I would say I've advised approximately 8 local authorities across the UK on restructuring to be able to support the services that they need to be able to provide to their local communities. As a resident of Calderdale, I'm absolutely floored and I'm absolutely disgusted. And I'm really angry as I'm sat here. Firstly, the suggestion that any of the local councillors are, which was suggested by Councillor Press, that are working against the council on something like this is just ridiculous. Let me be really clear, they're working for the residents and they're working really hard for the residents. And it's those people that we see in our communities every single day dealing with stuff like this and trying to manage the situations and the frustrations from the local communities. I think some councillors, certainly officers, you know, I do not know where you get the suggestion from that you are doing a good job in relation to the waste recycling services. Your waste recycling services are run by Suez, they're a contractor, and it's really simple: manage the contract and manage them. If you have got, and you're telling me, you sat here telling me that for safety reasons, for health and safety reasons, that staff cannot go back and work in these centres. You've also just said that you're redirecting some of the Elland and Sawbury Bridge staff to other sites. So you're increasing staff in some sites and increasing the rate of the chance of infection. You're increasing traffic to those sites as well. So you're increasing people that are going through them sites. So actually what you're doing is you're increasing the opportunity and the chance of infection rates at those particular sites. You then tell me that it's going to cost money to man the roads in Sawbury Bridge and Elland if we reopen them. Actually, if you get them reopen, there'll be less traffic, and if the quicker you get them open, the quicker we'll not need these traffic management processes in place. Quite simply because people will be getting rid of the waste. I understand that there will be queues. I absolutely do. Sawbury Bridge is not a main road. It's not a main road. It might be a busy road. It's not a main road, and it could be managed better. And the staff there could work there. We've got nurses that are going to work every day and are managing and are close to people, working close to people, and they're going in every single day. We've got barbers that are managing to groom men's beards. Okay, and you're telling me that you cannot allow staff to go into these sites and work in these sites. We've got shop workers, supermarket workers that are passing the public every minute of every day. They're in as close proximity as they possibly could be, and you're telling me that these staff can't work together. You're telling me that you've got to close every other bay in there. I do not see, when I park in Sainsbury's or Tesco's, every other car parking space shut. It's absolute rubbish, and you're sat here justifying it to yourselves. You're not listening to the residents. We have community members, people within these communities, residents that are paying for skips, but they're also paying the council tax. They're paying for your bulky waste service collection when you get it back going. But they can't afford it. These people have been on furlough for months and they're getting 80% of the wage. You need to understand this is not reality. I understand that you've got an £8 to £20 million deficit in your budget, but I also understand that you've got a £20 million grant from the government to support you through COVID. That grant is not there to put the hole that you already had in your budget. It's there to support us through COVID, and you need to stop thinking like that. And I understand that you've got, all these social services and children and young people services and all of the adult services that you've got to fund and support. But what we're talking about is we're talking about children trying to play in the gardens where there's now rats. You've just mentioned that fly tipping is, the biggest area is in central Halifax. I just invite you to come up to Ripponden, come up through Richworth and go up towards the motorway. And I can promise you that there's probably 2 or 3 occasions a week where stuff has been dumped down the side of the embankments. So we come off the M62 into Calderdale, and what a mess it looks. You're also telling me that it's about affordability to open these sites. These sites have been open and they are a service to the public, and the public pay for that service. We do not have curbside waste collection that is excellent. And I'm saying this as a resident. Those black bins and the bags are absolutely hated by the residents. And I know this because I talk to the residents frequently. We're going to neighbouring towns like Oldham, City and Manchester and others, and they've got some of the best recycling facilities going, and they've managed through lockdown really, really well. And the reason I know they've managed because I've been supporting them to help them restructure their resources so they can get it. We've also talked about needing to save money because you've got this deficit. Most councils have got a deficit. I understand you need to save money, I really do understand it. But I've also had a lot of involvement with Calderdale Council where I have seen significant waste of money. I mean, tens and tens of thousands of pounds. And I'll give you a great example. There was a staff member that was suspended, I'm not mentioning any names because I won't do, there was a staff member that was suspended for 15 months on full pay. And that situation should have been dealt with within 6 weeks. Not just because it was not commercially, it was disastrous for your organisation, but because for the good of the organisation and the good of that employee, it should have been sorted out and it should have been dealt with. So the £30,000 that you spent paying that staff member to be at home while the situation was really badly handled could have been saved, and that could have gone into your children's and young people's services or your adult services, or it could have helped keep Sawbury Bridge waste open. I am astounded, absolutely astounded, to sit here and listen to you say we do a good job. Officers that are saying we're doing a good job on this, you're not, and you're not listening to the public. I'm astounded that you say that there's some councillors that are not working with the council. You're not in that community every day and you're not feeling it. I've got a 24-mile round trip to get to my local tip. And on top of that, I've got wait time, etc. I'm trying to run a business and we're busy. And you know what? I do not have that time to do that. And I also don't have the luxury of being able to get across there and get back with the amount of stuff that I've now got in one trip. It's going to take,
Mel,
it's going to take 3 trips.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to digest everything you said. Do you mind?
Sorry, could I just say something, please, just very quickly, because I'm conscious of the time and I'm sure lots of other people have things to say. What I was trying to say was that there's been a lot of misinformation. I think Councillor Scullion also referred to the rumours that have been flying around about these tips. There's been a lot of not unhelpful things being said, and I felt that a couple of people at the start of the meeting were being unhelpful about the intent of the council and what the council was trying to do. I was not suggesting they weren't working with the council. I didn't think they were being fair about how the council has coped with COVID-19 and how our officers have worked extremely hard. That's all I was trying to say. I'm sorry if that was misinterpreted. That's all I wanted to say.
Actually, it came across as a really, really offending to the people that are genuinely working really hard in the community to listen to the community.
Well, I'm sorry if that's the case. I didn't intend.
And the meeting has come across as the councillors and the cabinet and the officers. Really, I do not understand the feeling and emotion around this. I actually put out a message to some of the residents via text, via Facebook, just an hour before we started, and said, I'm attending this meeting, give me the key points, because I just want to get the key points in. And you know what? I got 55 messages through social media and through text in 1 hour from residents who are so passionate about this. 55 from just our area. You're missing the emotion in this. You really are missing.
Mel, if I may, no, I completely agree. It's a motive issue, because if fly tipping does increase, you're seeing it in your community, which you live and breathe. I completely accept that point. If I may, we're getting a bit close to the ending of this discussion now. I've still got Sophie, Councillor Holdsworth, if she wishes to speak, and also Josh. I'm going to then call it a day on this discussion. Over to Sophie. Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Can you hear me okay? My connection's also a bit dodgy this evening.
You sound like a bit of a robot, but we can hear you.
Right, okay, I think that's usual. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robinson. I just want to pick up on a couple of things that Councillor Scullion and Councillor Press did say about the rumours that have been circulating and where they've stemmed from. I honestly don't know where they have stemmed from, but I don't think the council have helped with their communication and not confirming or denying that they were true, which has led to people, the perpetual worry and concern that the 2 tips won't ever be opened again. Just picking up on what Jamie was saying about how, he said that there was a highways issue and how much it cost each individual tip to be opened to put a traffic regulation order in place. Could we not simply have time slots that you book? Would that not solve the issue of long queues and highways? Maybe not at every tip, but certainly the ones that remain closed at the moment. Could that operation not start until we get into a better position where people can just, first come, first serve kind of thing? And just to pick up on the point of money, am I right in thinking that the contractual obligations, the council has to pay Suez in full until a renegotiation of the kind of recovery contract is in place? So aren't we spending this money anyway without the tips being open?
Yeah, okay, so some of the answers that we sent around before answered the first question about the booking system. I'll just read the answer now. It was considered, but it was felt to penalise those without internet access, estimated at 12% of households. potentially to conflict on site with people turning up late or early, etc. And it needed significant development time from IT when their resources were being pulled in those directions. Also, the feedback we've had from other authorities, it's not worked that well. As for the costs of running the site, yes, until a new relations for contract is agreed, the running of the sites has been is still being paid for contractually. However, the traffic management costs are extra costs, and it's not the traffic management costs are to manage the queues of people coming in on the roads. So even if traffic was low, we'd still have to have them at first to see if it would work properly. Considering where both sites are and the amount of cars we can get on site at one time, I would envisage that we'd need them for quite a while. Thank you.
Yeah, okay then. Now, we do have Pete Hunt has mentioned in the chat he wants to come in. However, we are drawing to the end of this discussion and there does need to be a cut-off point. And unfortunately, we are nearing that cut-off point. So what I've suggested to Peter is if he comments in the chat with his question or his statement or something, and then all members will have access to that statement. Councillor Holdsworth, do you wish to come in at this point?
Yes, please, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a point made earlier that the majority of fly tipping is in Halifax town centre. I can personally say that I must report fly tipping in the lay-by in Norland twice a week, usually garden refuse or occasionally white goods, and on 3 occasions disused cannabis farms which have been dumped on the lay-bys in Norland Moor. I've also got another question, which is not point scoring, but I've had an email from a 76-year-old Greetland resident today who's accumulated an enormous amount of garden waste over the summer. This man says he's been gardening for 40 years and he normally takes this to Ellen Tip. He has a trailer. He's got far more than one trailer's load to dispose of now, and he doesn't wish to drive all the way to Halifax and back 4 or 5 times. He says if the council don't sort things out, he's just going to put it in black bin liners and put it in his household waste disposal. Now, I'm not supporting this, but I do think that people are underestimating the anger of residents throughout Calderdale in all areas. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much there, Councillor Holdsworth. Josh, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask at this point, and maybe it's something that we can kind of clear up in what we come out of this meeting with, but I mean, my experience of the flooding tells me that actually you can be creative with these things if it is difficult to open the tips. So one of the first things that we did was we got skips brought temporarily to a number of areas, and that had quite a good impact in terms of people being able to dispose of stuff quickly and safely and cleanly. And I wonder if we've looked at anything creative. I know that time is running out. So what I thought I might suggest we do is we move to a resolution. I think there's really strong feeling about this, and I think as a council we should send this back to Cabinet. We should get them to have a look at it, and we should look at both what they can do in terms of opening up the tips, but also what other creative solutions they can come up with, maybe using some of the ideas we've heard today. And I'm just wondering, I'm going to make the proposal we send this back to Cabinet and ask them to come up with some solid options that we can kind of think about and maybe discuss it at this committee again in future.
Okay then, so we've got a recommendation from Councillor Fenton-Glenn to send it back to Cabinet to come up with some options, then to bring it back to this place board. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second that, George.
Right. Councillor Cabinet. Okay, appreciate that, Councillor Fenton-Glenn. I'm going to make an amendment to that. Just because time's cracking on with this issue, and if we don't be careful, we're going to go into Calderdale's very own winter of discontent here. Fly tipping's on the up, it's only going to get worse. And I would like to make an amendment to that. Just simply, there's beauty in simplicity, they say. My recommendation is to Cabinet and to officers to say, reopen the household waste and recycling centres. And just as simple as that. Cabinet officers, they can construe that how they wish. If they want to look into weekend opening, if they want to look into time slots, as Councillor Whittaker suggested, look into those. However, it's pertinent and it's important that we reopen the tips. Can I have a seconder for that amendment?
Can I add something, George, to that?
Yeah.
My views on fly tipping and littering are well known. Did a report on it, had a working party on it, and I get quite emotional about it, which is why I kept quiet. I've listened to a lot of the points. A lot of valid points have been made, and I think one of the points that's been made is that people outside the council are doing the best to get the country back on its feet and the economy working. But our council doesn't seem to want to go back to work. And I'm struggling with it. I couldn't even get a meeting in the office arranged because everyone else can do it, but for some reason the council can't. And I agree with you. I think we should get these tips reopened because there is a lot of fly tipping. I mean, somebody mentioned Central Halifax, and part of the report we did, if you had 5 tips in Halifax, there'd still be a lot of fly tipping in Central Halifax because nobody bothers to apply for a permit. So I don't think that's a good comparison. But I do think people have a long way to drive to the tip, and when they get there, there's a queue. And I've been to Halifax a few times. I had to wait an hour just to dump a bit of stuff. So I'm going to support that motion that the tips are reopened imminently. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Caffrey. Right, so we've got a proposal and we've got an amendment. Now we're into the negotiation stage. Councillor Fenton-Glynn, what do you think to my amendment? Would you like to change yours?
I'm happy in spirit. I think we could certainly say, could we find a form of words where we say we send it back to Cabinet with the recommendation they open the, they open the tips or something like that. I think if we just say open the tips, it's sort of meaningless. So we send it back with that recommendation or that understanding that they open the tips, and if they're unable to, they look for other creative ways that we can actually get waste disposed of properly in the communities that are most affected.
That's an interesting point. I'm content with send it back to Cabinet with the recommendation that they reopen the tips. Would you be happy with that?
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt? I just want to point out that there is a petition which is going to full council, which is being held on the 2nd of September. So you can actually put forward recommendations to the council, because this will be presented to the council by Councillor Holden. So that is also an option that you can do. But we do need to formally recognise the recommendations that we are going to provide either to Cabinet or Council.
Thank you, that's really helpful, Kirsty. Could we recommend it to both Cabinet and Council?
Fine by me.
Yeah.
Yes, but like I was saying, you can actually recommend anything to both meetings. It will be heard at a future meeting of Cabinet anyway. So it can also always form part of their discussions, yeah.
Perfect. I like a good compromise, it's fantastic. So what we've got on the table, we've got recommend to Cabinet and Council to send it back to Cabinet, or a recommendation to Council. I just said that out loud, it didn't make sense. That you reopen the tips. That's what we've got on the table. So we'll go to a vote then. So we're voting on the amendments. All those in favour? Right. I'm just looking. So we've got all place members. Councillor Kavanagh, your camera's not on.
George, sorry to do this, but can I just clarify? I'm slightly confused because I thought what we were doing is we're sending it back to Cabinet with a recommendation to open or explore other options if it's not feasible to open. Is that what you've got written down?
No, it's just to reopen the tips, sending it to Cabinet and Council. Have you got a comment, Josh? I don't know.
I mean, the only thing is that if we have that recommendation and Cabinet say that they can't, I'd like to say, you know, there's been a few people have mentioned other ways, like people getting skips and stuff. I don't want that discussion thing done about kind of making waste management better to reduce fly tipping, you know. And I don't think that's, you know, that's not trying to get people out of it, if that makes sense.
Could I just say, I wanted to also make sure that we include the suggestion that Mel made about reviewing public health's interpretation of the safe distancing within tips and everything, because I think, you know, if we can expand capacity at the existing sites, that would at least go some way to resolving the problem immediately while we're waiting on, you know, further developments.
Right, okay. So we've got, so Audrey, did you just mention about reviewing public health guidance on self-distancing within tips?
Yeah, definitely. To increase capacity.
Right. Sorry, my brain cells are buzzing right now. Right, okay. So, and Kirsty, your knowledge of the council system, if we send this to council, what can then come of that?
Council can make recommendations back to Cabinet to look at how they actually work through this going forward.
Isn't that, sorry Kirsty, isn't that a bit redundant, because we can make recommendations direct to Cabinet?
You're both bodies that can make recommendation to Cabinet. So
okay.
Let's do that.
So we're making a recommendation to Cabinet and Council to reopen the tips, number one, and number two, to review the public health guidance on the safe distancing within the tips to increase capacity. Anything else? Any more for any more? Josh, are you content with that now?
Yeah, I'd say reopen the tips, and I don't know if you have a line like, you know, find, you know, support waste manage or something like that. I don't know, but I can't quite work out. Do you know, can you understand what I'm getting? That I don't want the other ideas that have been mentioned to be lost. And that, but
okay.
Yeah.
Reopen the tips and support innovation.
Yeah,
George, if there's an
or
issue
something like that, or support new ideas.
If there's an issue in terms of, you know, practical actual issues and not being able to reopen them, do we not need to have a line in there that says explore other options to address the issues that the residents are currently facing? Because that's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is help the residents in those areas. What we don't want is a back and forth. So if there is a real genuine practical issue, which means both tips cannot open full time, what we actually want Cabinet to do is to spend time looking at creative options that actually meet the needs of the residents in those areas. So that needs to be within the motion, within the resolution.
What do you think to Councillor Kavanagh then? Reopen the tips, and if they are not reopened, bring it back to this panel, and then we can then look into the creative solutions.
But we then just repeat the same discussion that we've just had. I mean, I think that there's lots of ideas that people have already talked about tonight, and I think Cabinet have been listening and officers have been listening. So, I mean, are you suggesting that Cabinet come back to us with those options? Is that what you mean?
No, I'm saying that Cabinet should just reopen the blinking tips. That's all I'm suggesting. As simple as that.
No, I understand that, but if don't we also want to make sure that there's another option? So if there's another option in terms of what we don't want is for Cabinet to look into it and then say, actually, we can't open them. What I'd prefer is if they say we can't open them, but here's 3 options to meet the needs of residents, or we can open them, brilliant. But why are we backing? Don't we want as many possible options as possible options to meet the needs of residents?
Councillor Caffrey, you've got a comment.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, if they close the tips, and there were other options, they would have already put them in place. Surely you wouldn't just close. If you had options apart from closing it, you'd have done them already. You wouldn't just suddenly think of them when you've closed it. So I've not heard anything that's suggested there are other options but to open the tip. I mean, what other options are there? I mean, you can't have a skip on every street corner because the cost would be phenomenal. So if any of the officers have got other suggestions, well, they should have been mentioned before rather than sort of send it back, think about it a bit more, then come back again and say we've considered the options and there aren't any, so we're leaving them closed. We're leaving the door open just to get rebuffed.
I agree with that.
My instinct is that if there were other options, it would be around things like, you know, suspending bulky waste charges in areas that are particularly badly affected or something like that. Now, you know, those, I mean, that's just some ideas, but what I'm saying is that I'd like the door to be open and Cabinet to be able to think of other things, so that, you know, Samantha's parents aren't you if it's just impractical for people like that to be able, you know, to get to a tip, and we're not, you know, and there is a public health reason for not opening a tip. Like all I'm saying is that we should probably have a line in there of finding ways, you know, finding as many solutions as possible, and just, you know, I mean, I'm happy to go with open the tips. I just want something that, you know, gives a bit of latitude either way to kind of make sure that we, if it's impossible to open the tip, we have other possibilities explored.
I mean, Jamie did mention the point that the tips could be reopened within 2 weeks if they get given the green light. So as far as I'm concerned, if we make the recommendation to Cabinet to reopen the tips, then they should be reopened. Yeah, I've got nothing more to add to that point.
Financial cost to keeping these tips closed cannot be viable. It must be more economical to open them and pay the costs of the traffic management. It's logical. You know, you're spending more money on picking up the fly tipping, you're still paying SUIs anyway, you know, it's just not logical. So look at the financial side of it. The health and safety side of it, that argument is gone. It doesn't wash when you've got, you know, emergency services doing what they do. Don't wash.
Okay, I'm making it. Thank you, Mel. I'm making a decision on this. I would like to put forward a recommendation to Cabinet and Council to reopen the tips. I'm taking Councillor Smith's point about the public health guidance. I'm taking that point, adding it in there as well. And then to mitigate Josh's and Councillor Kavanagh's concerns, I'm going to request that we discuss this issue at a future panel meeting to then discuss options if the tips haven't reopened. But I don't want that within the recommendation. I think short and simple's adequate for this. Does everyone agree? Any final comments? Yep. No. Sorry, I heard a murmur. No. Okay, right. So I'm proposing it. I've got Councillor Caffrey seconding it. If Josh is supporting it, Josh could support it equally. It's up to you.
Happy to let Councillor Caffrey second it, but I'll support it. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Right. All in favour? Yeah, that's looking unanimous to me. Yeah, that's unanimous. Right. Thank you very much. And discussion over. There's nothing like a negotiation at 7:38 p.m. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone attending. Really
thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Blood pressure's going down now.
Right, on to the next agenda item. Item number 6. Now, the purpose of this is because there were some it's actually got blood pressure. Right, item number 6. Item number 6. Members' questions. The purpose of this, just really quickly, is because some of the answers or questions and answers weren't to do with the petitions, so we thought we'd slot this in there. Do any members have any questions on this item? No? No? Okay then. Well, in that case, finito. Thank you very much for everyone's diligence in this meeting. It's been a good meeting, and I would say get home safely, but we're at home, so thank you.